Morning everybody, welcome to National Scrutiny Week and welcome to today's webinar. Of course, all my apologies in the world for you having to wait around, and unfortunately it was just one of those things with the connection where I am. So thank you for sticking with us. I'm not going to talk too much in terms of the introduction because I know we want to get to the presentation and get on with things. So my name is Louise Thompson, I'm Head of Business Services at TPAS England. I'm delighted to have you with us. And this session today is a no-nonsense guide to scrutiny. So hopefully by the end of it, you will have learned all you need to know about scrutiny in terms of how it works, where it's come from, and some key tips and hopefully advice as well. So just to kick things off then, it's a no-nonsense guide because I think we're just going to cut to the chase and really answer the key questions. So the first slide really just reminds us where scrutiny's actually come from. It's been around for quite a long time now, probably over 10 years when it first came out. And people today are still sort of, raving about the good stuff it's managed to produce and the great outcomes that we've had from it. So this is just a reminder for people that scrutiny is absolutely vital when it comes to tenant engagement and when it comes to housing business generally, actually. So this is a tenant involvement and empowerment standard. It's part of the regulatory requirements. So housing is regulated by the regulator for social housing, and they have some standards. And within that standard, there's this particular clause which talks about scrutiny. So it's quite clear from that social housing providers are expected and required to give their tenants the opportunity to scrutinise their performance and make recommendations about how things might be improved. So that's set within the regulatory framework. It's not a nice optional extra, it's actually a requirement. So hopefully the people who are joining us today are maybe involved in scrutiny in some way, so can see how it fits in with the regulatory requirements within the standards. I think the key thing there is how you do it is up to you, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. So the first, I guess, no-nonsense tip is scrutiny matters and the regulator says so because it's there in black and white. Okay, so if we just look at the next slide, what I'm going to cover today is sort of three main areas around scrutiny. And at TPAS England, we sort of say these are the key things really that need to be in place if we're going to have good scrutiny, and if scrutiny is really going to work. So I'm going to talk about some principles that surround scrutiny. I'm going to talk about the process because we have to do scrutiny. So what does that mean and how does that work? And then I'm going to talk about the people because without people, scrutiny is nothing. It doesn't function, doesn't happen. So it needs good people to be involved. So those are the three areas really that I'm going to cover in terms of today's session. So I hope that's all right with everybody. I hope you're fastened in and ready to go for the next hour or so. So the first step that I want to look at on the next slide, if you want to just go on again for me, Helen, to the slide afterwards, we're going to talk about principles. So people often say to sort of me, I do a lot of work around scrutiny. So, come on, how do you do scrutiny? What's the best way of doing scrutiny? And I always say to them, well, actually, it really is up to you. There's so many different ways of doing scrutiny, and that's why I stick the licorice all sorts in there, because if you've been following Scrutiny Week yesterday, you will have heard about so many different ways of doing scrutiny. So, we've got people who are doing a task and finish approach, so very sort of fixed in terms of this is what we're doing, this is when it finishes, and then we disband. We've got people who are involved in a central panel who come together. We've got people who coordinate others across their sort of organisation to get involved. We've got a boot camp approach that some organisations are using. So doesn't matter how you do scrutiny, and certainly I'm not here to say, you've got to do it this way or you've got to do it the other way. It's entirely up to yourselves. What works for your organisation and works for residents who are actually part of that organisation is absolutely fine. It just needs to happen. Okay, so pick your licorice all sorts out there, decide which one you are, which one works for yourselves, and go for that. What I will say, and the next slide I think is key, because this is something that I think we need to really think about when it comes to scrutiny, because If you do not build it on solid foundations, it will collapse. A bit like that house there, a bit like my Wi-Fi as well earlier, I think. So what I'm saying here is that when it comes to scrutiny, we have to think about some key foundations to build it on. And these are the ones I'm just going to take you through now. So starting with the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about how important this particular principle or foundation is. Independence, because without independence, scrutiny is meaningless, it's pointless, because what needs to happen is for tenants, customers, residents, whatever you want to call yourselves, they need to lead and own the scrutiny process, and that's most important. And people say, well, you know, how can that be? How does that even happen? You know, give us examples. Well, for me, independence is about tenants actually deciding which area of the business they want to scrutinise. So if they want to look at a particular area of the business, the organisation says, absolutely fine, we'll support you in that, we'll make it happen. So they choose what to actually scrutinise. And they also have the independence to ask for the information that they want. They have the independence to ask to interview certain people within the organisation. They're not led in a direction in terms of making recommendations. Recommendations may not be accepted, but at least they've been put together independently. So making sure your organisation is aware that a tenant scrutiny body has to be independent. It has to lead and own the process. Build it on that firm foundation, that sort of stone, get that in place, and then you will see that scrutiny starts to function as it should. So I hope some of you today can relate to that. I hope you've got independence in your particular scrutiny process. I hope it works for yourselves, and I hope that you get supported when it comes to making sure that it is independent. Okay, so the second sort of foundation, if you like, and we're going to move on to the next slide, is looking really about inclusivity. And this is not necessarily about saying you have to, you know, have everybody involved in scrutiny, but it's about making sure you give everybody the opportunity to input into it. So if you choose a topic to scrutinise, how are you actually listening to the views of other customers around that particular topic? How are you involving them in terms of finding out what their views are? So it can't just be a small group of people saying, well, we think that, we think the other. It's about reaching out and connecting with the wider tenant base. So they're able to input their views, they'll be able to connect well with you. And however you do that, again, is up to yourselves. But it's really important that scrutiny is not inward looking. It's not about a group of individuals. It's actually about throwing it out to the wider tenant base and saying, what do you think about this service? Let's gather some evidence. You know, how are you seeing this particular problem? What are the issues for you? So connecting well with the wider tenant base and other engagement structures. So if you've got mystery shoppers or tenant inspectors or tenants associations, how is scrutiny linking in with them as well? Okay, so just making sure you reach out and try and involve as many people as possible, or give them the opportunity to be involved, is very important. One of the criticisms I sometimes hear is that, oh, there's just a group of 6 or 7 people and they're not very diverse, they don't represent our customer group. Well, okay, but maybe those people have got time to give up and invest into scrutiny, and that doesn't lessen their contributions. But what that group of people really need to be doing is going out and talking to a wider, diverse group of people. So they are getting views from all kinds of different customers and different residents. So they're not necessarily themselves representative in terms of their demographics or their characteristics, but they're actually making sure that they're talking and involving people and giving them the opportunity to have their say as well. So inclusivity means lots of different things, but making sure that scrutiny is outward looking and connects well is your second foundation stone. So make sure, hopefully, you've got that in place. Okay, let's go on to the next foundation. And I think this one is really important because it's about positivity within the organisation. Nothing worse when you go out, you know, you sort of listen to scrutineers talking and they say, well, you know, we've done a lot of work, but we're not sure we're being listened to, and you know, some of the staff still feel a little bit threatened by us potentially. You know, nobody really knows what we do. I think they think, you know, we're just nosing around trying to cause trouble, but that's not what we're about. So this particular foundation is making sure that the organisation encourages and supports tenant-led scrutiny. And that goes into the culture of the organisation, it goes into the senior management leading by example. It also talks to every level of staff. You know, can you support scrutiny? Because ultimately, scrutiny is not about finding fault, it's not about tripping people up. It's actually about looking for good things as well as things that can be improved and working together to improve things. You know, that positivity is very, very much a part of good scrutiny and making sure that actually happens. So some of you may be thinking about your organisations now and thinking, yeah, absolutely, they welcome scrutiny. You know, they know what we do, they know that it's positive and it delivers change. Others may be thinking we've got a little bit of work to do around that. So thinking about how you can get your organisation to support you, lots of different ways of doing that. You know, I've known groups of tenant scrutineers who've met with senior management informally. They've gone out and talked at team meetings so people get to know who they are and what they're trying to do. I've known them put things on staff intranet, you know, sort of the website for the organisation. But really just building relationships and just making sure that people understand you're not a threat, you're on their side and you want to work with them, albeit as a critical friend. And we'll talk about that with the next one. So the next foundation, the next stone that you're going to put in place is the constructive stuff. So again, no room really in scrutiny for being destructive. There's absolutely room for challenge, absolutely room for being that critical friend. Yes, hold the organisation to account, absolutely. But it's about doing that in a constructive way that delivers results, not about being destructive, because scrutiny needs both parties. It needs the landlord, it needs the tenants to work together effectively. So actually having that in place, that constructive element, is really important. And again, that'll go around down to, you know, who you recruit to scrutiny, who you get involved, the right attitudes, the right approaches. And it's about people really understanding what scrutiny is about and making sure that they are taking that role up with the right mind and the right attitudes and the right approaches. Okay, so the last one when it comes to our foundations is around purpose. If you're doing scrutiny at the moment and you don't know if it's making a difference, you're not sure whether your recommendations have maybe been implemented, or you just feel that it's become maybe a little bit tired, then it needs to be revisited, because good scrutiny is built on it making a difference. It has to make a difference, because otherwise, what's the point? So scrutiny needs to be delivering service improvements. It needs to maybe be thinking about delivering value for money. It may be about, you know, holding the landlord to account, making them more transparent and accountable. It needs to think about all those things for it to be meaningful and effective. So the last sort of principle or the foundation of good scrutiny is having a purpose and being purposeful. Okay, so that in a nutshell is your principles. Don't care, doesn't matter how you do scrutiny. If you're building it on those key things, independence, inclusivity, positivity, being constructive and purposeful, you're on the right road, and your scrutiny, I'm sure, is being effective and is actually working as it should. So is everybody okay with that so far? I hope so. The fact I've got through 15 minutes without the Wi-Fi going down is a cause for celebration. So thank you for bearing with us. Okay, the next bit I want to talk about, so Helen, if you can go on to the next slide, is a process. Scrutiny has to have some kind of process built into it, because it's about gathering evidence. It's not about people saying, oh, yeah, I think this should change, or tell you what, that'd be a good idea. No, it's about gathering the evidence to be able to present recommendations. So with that in mind, you have to think about the process, because the process will actually either make or break the evidence that you're going to deliver and the recommendations that you're going to agree on. How you do it, again, is open to interpretation. It's something that you can work on with your organisation. But I just wanted to give you an insight and some tips really into how we would suggest the scrutiny should be structured and what the process should be. So in terms of the first thing that I want to talk about, it's about planning really the scrutiny review, because it's much like a project in terms of it needs that sort of focus around planning effectively and how you're going to do it and what you're going to do. It needs investigations. So again, we'll talk about gathering the evidence, and it needs then to be reported on, and it needs to be reviewed. So that loosely, I guess, is a framework that potentially you could use for your process. But let's look at that in just a little bit more detail on the next slide, really, because I think this is important to just try and sort of bring it down into a little bit more detail before we delve a little bit and dive a little bit more into it. So, scrutiny process. First thing, what you're going to review. We'll talk about that in a minute. How are you going to scope it? So what's in, what's out, what you're going to focus on, what you're going to put to one side maybe for another time. Thinking about then planning the project, who's going to do what, how long is it going to take, you know, what are the actions that you need to put in place, what resources do you need. Then doing the investigations, then the recommendations, reporting what you found and telling people about it, and then looking at how you track and review the recommendations that you've made. So that's a suggestion from us. A lot of the scrutiny that I work with follows this kind of process. There's some that do it slightly different, and that's absolutely fine as long as everybody's happy with it and it works. So let's go into a little bit more detail. Okay, let's talk about choosing a topic. So lots to go at, isn't there, when it comes to scrutiny? And I think that the great thing and what I love about scrutiny is that it just gets involved in so many different parts of the business, you know, whether it's from scrutinising, you know, sort of repairs, whether it's empty properties, whether it's ground maintenance, antisocial behaviour, complaints. There's such a wide range of topics really that tenants can scrutinise. And again, I think that's a real plus when it comes to scrutiny, that it should be access all areas. It should be about thinking, what do we want to look at and how will we decide? So underneath choosing a good topic and the bullet points there's some ideas, some suggestions around choosing a topic and how that's done in places. The first one is about looking at surveys. So I've put the STAR survey up there, which is the survey of tenants and residents. And a lot of organisations carry that out on a regular basis. They survey a sample of residents and they use that information to find out what's really working well, how satisfied tenants are or unsatisfied they are. And that can be a real sort of useful diamond of information really. So finding stuff out about tenant satisfaction really gives you scrutiny as a feeling for what areas of the business are being flagged up maybe as ones that we should look at in more detail. So are there any concerns that are coming through from that data that, yeah, we need to maybe check that out. Let's put that on the shortlist for scrutiny review. Let's have a look at that. Same with your performance information. A lot of organisations have key performance indicators. They gather lots of information about how well they're doing or how they've performed against certain targets. Get hold of that information, start looking at it again, start thinking, okay, well, why aren't we performing very well on, I don't know, percentage of repairs that are done right first time? Why is it that void properties, empty properties have gone up in terms of the letting time? So that information again starts building a picture. The third thing to talk about is this idea of benchmarking, and that's just comparing yourselves really against other organisations, because you might sit there and think, well, we're not doing very well on that at all, are we? You know, really, I'd like to see us doing better. But it may be compared to others, you're actually doing quite well, you know. So where do you sit in terms of being compared against like-minded, sort of structured organisations? And just having a look at that can help you, again, just check where you are with certain aspects of the services that you're receiving. And I've put house mark in brackets there. That's an organisation, it's a club that landlords pay to be a part of, and they crunch all the data and they show people where you sit in tables when it comes to certain parts of the business. And again, that can be useful to actually just check out where you are in relation to other organisations. So do have a look at that if you can. The fourth thing on here around choosing a good topic is complaints data. And this is not about knowing, what Mrs. Brown complained about when it came to a next door neighbour. It's not that level of complaints data. It's the big stuff. It's around the themes. It's around the trends. So is there a trend around people complaining about the time it's taken to get repairs done? Maybe people are complaining about how their complaints been handled. Maybe people are complaining about grounds maintenance. So what is it that's coming through on the complaints data, and how can you factor that in to your decision making around topics? So really important to have a look at that and see what's coming through. There used to be a thing called scrutiny trigger. Maybe people who've been around a long time, like me in scrutiny, can remember this. This was the idea that if you had a group of tenants that actually wanted to trigger a review, so many had to come together and register that. And once they've done that, that would trigger a review that you could take and make happen within the scrutiny group or the scrutiny panel. So this is just about groups of tenants being able to say, the data might be telling you one thing, and this is always something to remember, that the data particularly needs to be looked at with an air of caution at times, because what's going off on the ground may be slightly different to what's being reported. So the idea that you listen to people on the ground, so your tenants associations, again, maybe tenants that are coming forward, and you just know that there's a build up of people's dissatisfaction that's perhaps not being reflected in the data. And that's always useful to take on board as well. So do look out for that and think about, well, could we have that? Could we have a trigger where, I don't know, say if 50, 60 residents are complaining about something, we would then trigger a review. Talked a bit about community groups and tenants associations. They're almost like, the ear on the ground, aren't they? They know the word on the street, and listening to them as well can just make you help you to make sense of the other stuff that's coming in. So choosing a topic, lots of ways of doing it. I'm sure you've got your own ways, but again, just having an approach to that can be very, very helpful. Okay, so let's say that you've actually decided what you're going to scrutinise. So then we're going to go on to the next slide and look a little bit at how you sort of maybe scope and plan your topic for scrutiny. I always say don't cast the net too wide. I think somebody said to me, scrutiny is like was like me going into Home Bargains actually. I only go in for one thing and then I come out with like a shed load of stuff and a trolley full. So scrutiny is a little bit like this. Just be careful about, if you start to look at one thing, that you don't get sidetracked to then start looking at other things as well. So thinking about, if you want to look at repairs, what aspect of repairs is it? Is it that, the communication's not good? Is it that the repairs are not done right first time? Is it that they're taking too long? So really try and narrow it down in terms of what it is you actually want to look at, and don't get sidetracked into other things and end up chucking stuff into the review that actually you don't really need at this moment in time and is not helping you with the actual question or the solution that you're actually trying to find out from the scrutiny itself. So do be specific, really sort of say to yourself, well, what are we trying to solve with this scrutiny review? Okay, we know people are not happy with grounds maintenance, but what is it that we're trying to help with here? Are we trying to get customer satisfaction up? Are we trying to improve maybe the look of the areas that they cut in? Is it that we're trying to save money on this? What is it that we're actually trying to do with this scrutiny? Are you clear about what you want it to improve or change? Once you've got your scoping done, do use a project planning tool. And I don't mean anything complicated here. It doesn't have to be. It can be if you want. There's all kinds of wonderful stuff out there when it comes to software for project planning. But sometimes it's just a simple table of, what needs doing, who's going to do it, when's it going to do it, when they're going to do it by, and how will we know it's been done, kind of thing. In a table can work as long as you've got some kind of plan and process in place. Okay, so that's a bit about scoping. And again, if you look in the TPAS resource hub, we've got some examples of scoping documents in there, and you can have a look at them and see whether they work for you. Or if you've got a scoping document that you think we could make use of, do send it in to us, and we'll get it in the resource hub, and other people can learn from yourselves and your good practice too. Okay, so the next bit I just want to go on to is to talk a little bit now about desktop reviews. And again, it's got a grand name in some ways, but all this is about is getting stuck into the paperwork. This is looking at the stuff that's there, that's written down, and really helps you understand the topic. So thinking about the policies, the service standards, looking at all the information that might be there in relation to the particular subject that you're going to scrutinise. So that's thinking, you know, again, if it's about repairs, what is there? You know, what service standards? What can people expect? Do we really understand, you know, about how the actual service itself works? Can we get somebody in to talk us through it? Can we get that person who's responsible for booking in repairs talking to us about how it might work? Are there any experts out there? You know, maybe you want to talk to some experts. And it was interesting when we spoke to Clive Betts on Monday as part of Scrutiny Week. He was saying that there's lots of people out there who are happy to help scrutiny panels, you know, academics or people with industry experience. So if you're wanting to scrutinise a particular aspect of the business that's maybe a little bit more complex, or you need some advice on maybe the financial side or the technical side, I know an organisation is going to be looking at their practice around Legionnaires, and again, quite a technical area, but getting people in free of charge to just give some expert advice of what might be needed there. So do think about that, and maybe that's something you could do in terms of getting people in there. Research what others are doing. Lots of reports on our resource hub from other organisations. So if you know you're going to be scrutinising ASB, how have other organisations done it? You know, what other things are out there that we could maybe have a look at and see what's good practice. So looking at all that stuff will help you start to narrow down some of the areas you want to investigate in more detail, and those will be your key lines of inquiries. Okay, we've looked at all this data, we want to start asking more questions in this particular area. Maybe it's around communication. We want to ask more questions maybe around why tenants are not satisfied with a particular aspect. So really teasing out some of the key areas that you want to have a look at is absolutely critical, and getting that ready for the next stage. Okay, so the next stage, hopefully, if we go on to the next slide, this is what tends to get called the reality checking stuff. So you've looked at all the data, you sort of know what's going off, you think, on paper, but now you need to get out and actually find out whether what's happening on the ground is actually the same as the stuff that you've been reading about. And again, lots of different ways of doing this. So it may be that you want to do a survey, and lots of tenant groups do surveys, scrutiny groups do surveys, and they do very good surveys to just find out from people, you know, hey, what's working well with this service? What's not working well? What would you change or improve? You know, what's your thoughts about the repairs that have been done? How do you feel your complaint was handled? So really getting that evidence starting to build up by asking for people's opinions. Lots of ways of doing this. You know, staff will help get Survey Monkey, as they call it, and use that to get electronic surveys out to people. Some organisations have their scrutineers go out and talk to people. Clearly, that's not something we can do as easily at the moment. But again, just gathering people's opinions, very important, but gathering what customers and tenants and residents are feeling. I think the other good tool is a focus group, and again, this doesn't have to be, you know, super complicated. It's again about, okay, from the survey, we're identifying that this is a particular issue. So what we're going to do is we're going to invite a number of people in, say 10 people, and we're going to talk about it in a bit more detail because we want to find out more. We want to know more about this. We want to find out what the issues and problems are. So just bringing that in will help you get more data or information from people about what the issues are. Interviewing is great, and again, I'll draw on the stuff that Clive Betts said on Monday. And, you know, he's the chair of the select committee, and he was saying how important interviewing is when it comes to scrutiny. And this may be a case of scrutineers sitting down and interviewing staff or having a chat with staff, but asking the right questions and not be afraid to keep pushing and supplementing the initial questions if you don't get the answer to start with. So interviewing staff about how things work and checking in with them about what the issues are, how things might change. And again, most staff are very happy to chat as long as you've got that foundation in place around scrutiny being supported. So interviewing can be very helpful. Observations, had loads of scrutineers observing, you know, when we used to have more housing officers, you know, the reception areas, observations, maybe listening in on phone calls. Clearly there's GDPR issues there, data protection issues, which we'll not go into, but that can be arranged. Or just going out with operatives as well, observing what they do. So actually doing stuff that enables you to see firsthand some of the things that are relevant to your particular scrutiny review. Mystery shopping, did a few of this in my time, you know, worked with some tenants, and they were scrutinising customer engagement, tenant engagement, and we rang the call centre up and asked the operative if they could help, because we wanted to get involved in the scrutiny panel. And it was interesting, very few of those calls staff knew about the scrutiny panel or knew about engagement. So again, training came from that, and we found when we went back, more staff understood what engagement was and could support residents who wanted to get involved when they rang up. So mystery shopping, really interesting. Customer journey mapping, this is just, you know, sort of taking yourself on that customer's journey, seeing all the points where they interact with the organisation. What is it like for them? Understanding that. And a couple of organisations are very good at customer journey mapping when it comes to scrutiny. Sovereign is one of them. They do it very well. So again, lots of different methods, but it's important for evidence gathering. I can't, you know, stress that enough, because at the end of this, if you're going to make recommendations, you've got to be able to back it up with the evidence that you've collected through your reality checking and the stuff that you've actually managed to get from that. Okay, so that's really sort of the reality checking side of things. I'm making this sound dead easy, aren't I? I'm just rolling through it so quickly. I know it's a lot more complex and there's more stuff to think about, but I think just going through the process with you will hopefully help. And the next slide is really something I just wanted to mention. It's this idea, and people who've maybe been involved in research or, you know, other sort of data collection work. This is about triangulation. We try and say to people who are involved in scrutiny, is it possible to gather more than one source of evidence to back up your recommendations? Because that helps, again, give it credibility, validity. It strengthens what you're saying. So, for example, this particular one is looking at customer service, customer care. Is it possible then to say, well, we scrutinised this and there was clearly an issue with staff not speaking to tenants or speaking to customers correctly? There was an issue with that. How do you know that? Well, actually, we observed it. We actually had a focus group and tenants told us that as well. And then we actually did a mystery shopping exercise as well. And that told us that, you know, on 7 out of 10 times, we found that staff weren't communicating effectively, or were not using, you know, the right attitudes or approaches with staff. It just makes it a lot more significant if you've got more sources of data to back up, or evidence to back up what you're saying. So that's just a little bit about triangulation that I wanted to mention, because I think it's an interesting part of scrutiny and something that, you know, again, just adds that little bit more to it if you can do that. Okay, so thinking about what we've done so far, then we've done the desktop reviews, we've understood the subject, we've looked at all the paperwork, we've gone out and we've done the reality check-in, we've tried our best to sort of get some you know, triangulation of evidence together, and we're in a position now to start thinking about our recommendations. And again, once you've started to do the scrutiny process, your recommendations, it's amazing how they start to flow out. And, you know, people will talk about the numerous recommendations they've come up with based on their scrutiny stuff. And that's absolutely what scrutiny is about. It's about putting forward those recommendations. How you do that, I think, is equally important, because what you don't want is to have put all that work into it, to come up with your recommendations, and then for it to just kind of, you know, not go anywhere or just feel very flat. So invest time in thinking about how you're going to report your findings. How is that going to happen? How are you going to make sure that people are going to sit up and listen to what you've got to say as a result of your scrutiny review? So you can do this in another, in you know, a number of ways. Organisations tend to put together, or scrutiny groups tend to put together reports. Nothing wrong with a written report, I think. It depends what it looks like and how it's done. I'm trying to put this tactfully, but there are some reports that are about 40 pages long, and to be honest, the chances of anybody reading that are fairly minimal. And I say that, you know, not because I'm trying to be dismissive of scrutiny, I'm just saying it because it's generally truthful that people don't have the time, energy or effort to wade through probably 30, 40 pages of scrutiny reports. So not to say that you can't still produce something like that if you really want to, but other organisations have started putting together maybe something that's a little bit more accessible. So can you do maybe a one-page summary? Can you maybe have a look at something that's, you know, an infographic, so it's doing it, you know, very visually in terms of how it's presented? Can you do a short video, you know? Can you put together, and again, I'll give you some examples of organisations that have done that, where they've just put together a short video that tells people, this is what we scrutinised, this is what we found, these are our recommendations, thanks for listening, and it's job done. Again, I am not saying don't have all your data together, don't have all your evidence somewhere, don't have all that sort of, you know, really detailed stuff. Absolutely do have that, but think about other methods as well, because you want to tell everybody, as many people as possible, what you've done. And if that means that tenants are going to maybe click on the video link and have a look, if it means that the board members are just going to have a look at that summary that you've produced and understand and appreciate that, maybe staff will as well, then it's got to be worthwhile. So don't just necessarily stick to one style of reporting. Think about your audience, think about who you're trying to get across to, and then maybe look at what you're doing with your report. Again, it may be that you want to do the sort of ticks there, you know, why you chose it, why you carried it out, what you found, recommendations, and where people can find the research, or you might want to do it a bit different. So Phoenix are a really good example, Phoenix Housing, a really good example of putting together infographics. So they sort of have it's almost like a newsletter. It's very readable, and it's on their website. I'd recommend people to go and have a look at it. So for every review that they do this short summary, and it's really attractive to read, and it's very informative as well. So a good example of actually, you know, how you might report things differently. I think Sovereign, they do a short video for each one of theirs as well, just a quick animation that you can pick up and have a look at, and that's always helpful, I think, if you don't want to read stuff. So again, think about your reporting, think about the different ways that you can do it, because if you've done a cracking scrutiny review, you want to make sure as many people as possible know about it, because what that will do is get more people involved in it, because they can see what you've done and how well you've done it. Okay, so we're nearly at the end of the process. Way back when I talked about it, there was some different stages. So we're nearly at the last one here, which is around tracking impact and change. And it's interesting because I do like to ask the question, what difference has your scrutiny made? That's my favourite question sometimes. And people sometimes say to me, oh, it was great, you know, we got 50 recommendations, and great, absolutely fantastic, but so what? What happened to them? Where did they go? Did somebody at board nod very nicely and go, yeah, that's really interesting, thanks very much for that, see you later? Or did somebody at board say, thanks for that, what we will do now is make sure that those recommendations are accepted and integrated into our business planning and service planning and action planning for next time round. So they actually go onto somebody's list of things to do. So just asking those additional questions, so if it's gone to board or maybe it's gone to the cabinet member for scrutiny, it's great that they like it, it's great that they're accepting it, but what are you going to do with it now? Where's it going next? Be clear about that and ask those questions, because the last thing you want is for it to go nowhere. So making sure that you have a system in place for knowing where those recommendations have gone is really important. I can't stress that enough, because again, I'd hate everybody to do all this work for things not to happen. And again, no, I keep talking about Clive Betts, but I think it was interesting to draw the parallels from what he was saying, that they did a scrutiny review, I think it's the tobacco business, and they said, the tobacco business said, oh, we go and do this, we'll do that, we'll do other, and then they went back and it's clear they've done nothing, they've done absolutely nothing. So again, so important even at that level, you know, when it comes to parliamentary scrutiny, so important that the recommendations are tracked by somebody and actually implemented as well. So how do you do that? And again, there's no sort of, you know, magic sort of formula for this. It's just having a system in place, and how you do that is up to you. So some organisations have a log. They'll log their recommendations, and then what they say to somebody on their panel is, right, okay, tell you what, Barbara, you're in charge, you can champion this particular review, you can be the review champion. We want you to just keep an eye on this now on the database for us. We want you to work with a member of staff to find out where those recommendations have got to, and you report back to us. So if you put a name on it and appoint a scrutineer, and also a staff member as well, to be that review's champions, it will be their role to monitor it and report back. And that seems to work well for some organisations, because what you don't want the panel to have to keep doing is spending all their time going back over stuff all the time, because you don't move forward. But if you can make it somebody's job, and even say to the organisation, look, we want you to come back to us every quarter with where you're at with these recommendations. We absolutely want that, and that needs to happen, because what we are not prepared to do is to just let them go and forget about them. So ask the organisation to report back to you, make sure they do that, get a scrutineer to be that staff member to be a champion for that particular review, and make sure they keep pushing it. And once you know what's happened to it, make sure you shout about that as well. So it's not just the recommendations, it's the impact at the end. And I know I was hearing yesterday that some organisations have an impact review. So again, they'll just say, yeah, those 15 recommendations, we've tracked them. And you know what? As a result of them now, we can say we saved X amount of money. We can say now that we've changed our complaints handling system. We can say now that you know, we've got a new system in place for repairs being done first time. So making sure you hang on to those and track those, again, so important, just as important as the report actually, making sure that you tell people about those changes that have been made. Okay, is everybody all right with that? Got a few nods, which is good. All right, so the no-nonsense stuff, what have we covered so far? Well, the first one is get it built on firm foundations. Scrutiny needs to be on firm foundations. Those foundations we've talked about, hopefully your scrutiny is on there and it's solid as a rock, hopefully. The second one is get a good process in place. Make sure you know what you're doing, you've got a clear way of actually going through things systematically, and you can tell people this is how we do our scrutiny. The third one is really about people. And again, I think it's so important to mention this because, you know, it's National Scrutiny Week, and I've absolutely been blown away by the number of residents, tenants, customers, whatever term you prefer, are actually involved in scrutiny. They give up so much time to commit to work with landlords to improve services, to hold them to account, to check on performance. It's phenomenal, the work that they do. And I think it's important to mention we have to look after these people. We have to look after our scrutineers up and down the country, because without that, we don't get scrutiny. Without scrutiny, we don't get better services. So it's absolutely vital we look after the scrutineers. So just some tips around this, about how we might do this and how we might think about it. And I'm going to talk about valuing people first, because scrutineers often say, you know, we don't necessarily want the world, but we do want a thank you. We do want to be appreciated. But even more than that, our value is the difference we've made. So don't just string us along. Don't make us a tick box exercise. What we want to know is at the end of it, you've done something as a result of our hard work. So valuing that difference, but also saying thank you. And, you know, we could get into a debate and discussion about how we reward scrutineers. Probably not for now, but I think it's an interesting debate, isn't it? You know, about, do scrutineers need or want rewarding? You know, whether that's financial reward, whether it's vouchers, whether it's other ways of doing it. But just making those scrutineers know that what they do is absolutely critical to this organisation. Whatever that looks like, make sure they're valued. And I can't stress that enough. And I hope Scrutiny Week will go somewhere to doing that as well. Okay, training and support. Great. I mean, we do lots of things around training and support. I think TPAS are pretty, you know, sort of good in terms of the stuff we offer, but it's not all that's out there. Does your organisation offer you internal training and support so you understand how the organisation works? You know, do staff members maybe give up their time to come and train you on the financial side of things, maybe the governance side of things? So what training and support are you offered? Is it the training and support that you need to be able to do that job effectively? I hope it is, because again, it's absolutely pointless taking taking people and asking them to get involved in scrutiny if you're not going to give them absolutely 100% that support and training that they need to do the job effectively. Okay, talk a little bit about volunteering opportunities. And I know, you know, a lot of staff sort of say, you know, we're struggling to recruit to our panel maybe, or we're not getting enough people to get involved. And just thinking about it slightly differently can help. And this is where you're offering it as a volunteering opportunity. So again, some organisations have gone out there and said, you know, it's not about sort of maybe being an involved tenant. It's about volunteering this, isn't it? It's about giving your time up free. So why not advertise it as a volunteering opportunity? Because ultimately, if you get involved in as a scrutineer, you've got training, you can develop your CV, you can get employability, you get the social aspect of it's good. So many of you will have got to know different people through scrutiny. So offering it as a volunteering opportunity, you know, on the Do It website, which advertises volunteering opportunities, or through your own channels as well. Just thinking about it slightly different might get more people involved as well. Again, when it comes to organisations, you know, staff, you know, can they be scrutiny champions? So they're actually talking scrutiny up when they're out and about. They're telling people who they work with. Do you know, at Scrutiny Panel, spot on, does a cracking job. Lots of really good stuff. So is there people in the organisation who could be that staff champion or ambassador for scrutiny? And again, we need good people who are staff members supporting scrutiny as well. So not just about the scrutineers. And I know there's a lot of staff put a lot of time and effort into making scrutiny work. And again, we need to value that, and we need to make sure that there's more people, more staff members shouting about the positives of scrutiny as well. Okay, I talked about promoting the difference that scrutiny makes. I think that's really important to make sure that we make time to show the difference it makes, because that is what people get involved in it for generally. And also involving as many people and customers as possible. We've talked about this before. You know, we've talked about how some organisations have a central panel of people, and then they have almost like people out there on the factory floor, if you like, or in the sort of you know, schemes or in their estates, being that scrutineer as well and helping support the central panel. Just making sure that you involve as many people as you can be very useful to do so. Okay, I think I've got to the end of my people stuff as well. So we've talked about people, we've talked about process. we've talked a little bit about the principles today. What I wanted to do with the last sort of 10 minutes or so is really just open the session up really to yourselves. I've no idea how many people we've got. I know we've got some questions in the chat as well. I'm struggling to sort of see the chat because of my iPad. So Helen, what I want to do is go to the chat. Could you just pick the chat up and see whether there's any questions or any issues that we need to bring to the fore?
Yeah, no problem. We've had a question from Alan who says, it may be a bit like Quality Street. Everyone will have their favourites, but would everyone in your team have theirs?
Oh, I like that. It's a good question, Alan. Thank you for that. Yeah, well, when it comes to Quality Streets, I kind of like them flat toffee ones in the gold, saying they're my favourite, to be fair. So when it comes to Scrutiny, what do I like? Well, I guess for me, it's a tough one, isn't it, really? As long as it works, I don't mind. But getting off the fence, Louise, I do like this idea of having a central panel that coordinates things, that actually, just really makes things happen, and then has maybe satellite sort of scrutineers who are doing extra bits of work as well. So maybe a central coordinating panel that actually draws on other people to do different jobs. Maybe I've seen that work quite well. But that's because it worked for the organisation. So yeah, give me a flat toffee or a central panel with a satellite scrutineers around it, I think, for me.
Okay, he's also saying, in regards to the desktop review and the point, identify the key issues to be investigated later. He couldn't see the bottom bit of the slide. You'll get a copy of the slides, Alan, so hopefully that will help.
Yeah.
It does the important things become the devil in the detail?
Yeah, I mean, again, the devil is in the detail sometimes, and I'm not saying scrutiny is, all sunshine and roses. I think there are issues sometimes with scrutiny, particularly if the scrutiny panel makes recommendations and the organisation doesn't accept them, because it's always, I think, worth remembering that scrutiny panels can't force the organisations to take on the recommendations. They have power to influence, but they don't have power to force things on the organisation. So sometimes, yeah, the detail is interesting because it is about then saying, well, okay, you're not accepting that recommendation. Why is this? Let's have a talk about it. And it may be that the scrutiny panel doesn't want to take that recommendation off. It still wants to stick with it on the report, but there's just a note saying, that the organisation couldn't accept it at this time. To be fair, there's not many that haven't been accepted, if I'm honest. There's very few, but you're right, the details sometimes needs to be worked through because it may be very reasons why recommendations can't be accepted.
Okay, thanks for that, Louise. We've had a question from Lucy who's asking if we've got any other tips to recruit people.
Yeah, I mean, I always think when I've looked at some of the marketing stuff that's gone out for scrutiny, and again, I don't mean this to sound, I've got to be careful what I say, isn't it? But yeah, it looks a bit boring. It looks a bit, why would I get involved in this? My advice was make it, really try and make it sound like a fantastic, exciting opportunity. Get the people who are excited and passionate about scrutiny to write the stuff that goes out. Not your comms people always, because sometimes I think they maybe don't always understand. But think about how you're marketing it. But how is it going to appeal to people if it's just like, get involved, we have an opportunity for you to scrutinise? Well, that means nothing to people, does it? Start with what it can achieve, really sort of ramp it up in terms of the excitement level. This is the best thing you'll ever get involved in because it does all these sorts of things. You get all these things out of it. And actually look at some Muir Housing, really good example of running a fantastic campaign around making involvement and scrutiny sound really exciting. In fact, I would have signed up for that because it really enthused me as well. So marketing and promotion, really important. Get that right. I think where you put it as well, again, I've talked about some of the volunteering websites. If you've got a voluntary action in your area, can you put it out there? Think about, sort of the demographics. And you know what as well, just actually targeting people and saying to them, I think you'd be great at this, because a lot of people think, oh, I'm not clever enough for that, or I won't be able to do that. They just need that encouragement to say, I believe in you, you'll be cracking at this, come and join us. And sometimes it is about that direct approach as well that can help. And I've seen that really pay dividends, because if you believe in somebody, they will come forward generally. And it's amazing what that can do. So yeah, make it sound like the best opportunity ever, because it is. Get it out there in some different channels and different platforms for advertising it, and actually try a bit of direct stuff as well, because I think that can help.
Okay, Alistair's just mentioned that he missed the organisation who did a great job at promoting Scrutiny. So if you could just repeat who that was?
Yeah, it's MUIR, so it's M-U-I-R, and I think, are they up in your way, Helen? Cheshire way, I think.
I think they are, yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Okay, we've got James who's saying, are housing regulations in Scotland in regard to scrutiny different, as lots have been published on the subject?
Yeah, Scotland is different, and I will say I'm not an expert in Scottish regulation, but I do know scrutiny is probably more formal and more recognised within the regulatory framework. So our friends in TPAS Scotland, I'm sure, will be able to help with that. So do get in touch with them. But I think it has got probably more formality, and you're right, I remember reading a lot of stuff around it as well. So yeah, Scotland is different, so I'm going to shut up before I mess it up and say TPAS Scotland will help.
Simon from Gateshead is saying, do you think the white paper, when it finally arrives, is going to be a key player in looking at areas of the business that should be tested?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? You know, we've waited that long, and all that excitement when the green paper came out, you know, and now it's gone on that long, it's just feeling like torture, isn't it, waiting for it actually to drop the white paper. I mean, I do hope things will be different. I mean, the principles that were in the green paper I thought were excellent. I think, you know, that really was moving engagement forward. Very excited for that. I'd hope that they're not going to water them down within the white paper. I hope they strengthen them, to be honest with you. So I do hope it moves things forward. I'd like to see, you know, more formality for scrutiny, if I'm honest. I'd like, you know, the scrutiny to be connected better with the regulatory framework, so you know there's more accountability. And I do hope, you know, residents and tenants and customers, you know, feel comfortable about accessing areas of the business to scrutinise that perhaps are not just operational or customer facing side of the business as well. I know some organisations do scrutinise asset management, you know, the whole sort of issue around future development. They do look at the finances. So it is, I think, about taking the opportunity to push boundaries with scrutiny, and hopefully the white paper will reinforce the role that tenants and customers and residents have got to play in that. So fingers crossed it does, and fingers crossed it comes soon. Yeah.
And Jenny's asking, what are your recommendations around skills matrix for members?
Yeah, I mean, we tend to sort of, you know, obviously ask in advance when we're working with organisations if they've done a skills matrix, because I think it's very important that they get the right people in place. Now, I've seen it done different ways, this, you know, I've seen organisations and said, look, we're opening our scrutiny up to everybody. We believe we can take people in, we can train them up, we can get them the skills they needed to become great scrutineers. Other organisations say, well, actually, we've got some competencies or skills we're going to recruit to, and we're going to do it that way. Now, I think for me, what's important is that scrutineers, when it comes to their skills, have got an open mind, that they absolutely don't come in with a hidden agenda, because that doesn't help. But having an open mind, being able to sort of be non-judgmental about things, to be able to you know, have good communication skills. But I guess what, when it comes to scrutiny, I think you need a mix of skills. You know, I would say it's like a jigsaw. You don't need everybody with the same skills, but you need people with different skills that come together. So have you got somebody who's good at data analysis, somebody who's good at communication skills? Have you got somebody who's able to, you know, maybe put together good reports, people with digital skills? So it's almost like you're looking to recruit different bits of a jigsaw, really. So I don't think there's one set of skills you need to recruit to. I think you need to look at what your panel needs or your group needs, and then maybe think about recruiting to them. But definitely have an open mind and not coming with any sort of agenda or hidden agenda, I think is important in the first place. Absolutely.
And Alison's asking, how many people would you recommend to have on a scrutiny panel?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, this. I've seen, panels as small as 4, and I've seen panels as big as probably 15. So I'm going to settle somewhere probably in the middle of that, 10-ish maybe. I mean, I think you need to have, it depends again what your panel's doing as well. I wouldn't advocate that panel does all the work. What they should be doing is saying, right, we've got other people to help do some desktop review. We've got some people who can help with surveys. So they shouldn't be doing everything. But if you've got a group who are going to coordinate stuff, I think, they can potentially sort of come together and work as a smaller group. But if you have got maybe a smaller organisation, or you have got a group of people who are going to do everything, you need more numbers. So again, it depends how you're going to do it. But I generally sort of seen panels around 10 to 12 have worked well in the past on their particular scrutiny. Yeah, not too many, because you never get stuff done and everybody falls out with each other eventually.
Joan is saying it's important that staff at all levels know about scrutiny. So we have suggested that at induction that they meet the scrutiny team members.
Love it. Yeah, brilliant idea. I think that is critical. As soon as you join an organisation, you meet the scrutineers, because that's telling you loud and clear these people are important, the job that they do is important, and it builds that trust and relationship from the outset. Love that. I think more organisations should do that. Who was that, Helen? Where was that from?
It was from Joan Swift.
Jo. Oh yeah, brilliant, Joan. Yeah, fantastic idea. Thank you for sharing that.
There's nothing else in the comments unless anyone wants to pop something in there. So I don't know whether anyone's got any more questions, but that's it from the chat box at the minute, Lou.
Brilliant.
Oh,
okay.
Just add one in, sorry, from Alan, who said, Louise has mentioned the right people and suggests being inclusive. What criteria can be used for the right people?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? The right people. Again, I don't think it's about skills necessarily. It's about attitudes, the right people. And when I say the right people, I think it's about, again, I've mentioned before, not coming with a hidden agenda, being able to work in partnership with your landlord effectively, coming in with that, I want to change something, I want to be constructive, I'm looking for solutions, I'm not looking for problems. I want to move things forward. Yeah, I'm gonna tell you what's wrong, but I'm telling you what's wrong for the right reason. So I think it's more about attitudes and approaches than it is about skills. You can really develop your skills, but I think as a scrutineer, the right person for me is that person who comes in and says, okay, yeah, I'm going to be dead honest, that's not right, but I'm going to work with you to make things better, because that's what I believe in, that by both of us coming together, the landlord and the tenant, resident, customer, we can make services so much better. We can make this organisation fantastic. So can-do attitude and approach, open mind, and really wanting to make a difference. Enthusiasm, passion, excitement for it as well. So yeah, lots of stuff really. But I think skills, about reading tables and maybe looking at how to communicate, they can be learned. It's that stuff that makes scrutiny exciting, is inside and who you are. So that's what the right person for me would be, I think.
Thanks, Lou. Alan's just commented again. It says, it seems that getting the right balance of people doing the right things to the right effects are easier said than done.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're spot on there. Yeah, this is all well and good in theory, Louise, isn't it? Yeah, in practice it is a lot easier, and I'm not going to deny that's not the case. I think some organisations have done it and done it well. I think it is a tough job. It is a tough job, and sometimes things will go wrong, absolutely. But I think if you believe in scrutiny and what it's doing, you'll keep trying and you'll keep going until you do get it right. But yeah, easier said than done, absolutely. Having been there and set up panels and stuff, I know absolutely that's true. But I want to give you I guess, assurances that it can work. And, you know, hopefully Scrutiny Week will give you some ideas to get to a place where it is working for yourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, Simon's just commented, from a member of staff's perspective, very pleasing to see how many people are getting online to get involved. Hopefully we can build on this, big changes, but big opportunities as well.
Yeah, definitely. I you know, clearly with what's happened, a lot has gone online, we've gone digital, always mindful of the ones maybe we're leaving behind who haven't got digital engagement capabilities or access. But I think the opportunities for us to do more of this stuff, to reach out to more people, are equally as exciting as well. Session this afternoon around digital scrutiny and how that might work, and going forward what the issues are. But like you, completely sort of overwhelmed by how many people have engaged with us digitally. And I think it's got to be a good thing, absolutely. You know, I think we'll reach out to more people, and as long as we're mindful of those we're leaving behind and help them to join us or help them to still take part, I think the future's looking really good for engagement. Yeah, I'd agree.
James has just said scrutiny panels versus assurance panels.
Yes, not come across a lot of assurance panels, but I think for me, go back to the principles. I think assurance panels maybe not as independent as scrutiny panels. I also think that potentially they don't have the remit or the freedom to maybe do some of the stuff. I could be wrong, not an expert on assurance panels, and I'm happy to be told otherwise if assurance panels do have that those principles. If they don't, you know, they're still doing a cracking job, but scrutiny has to have those principles at heart, I think.
Okay, I think we're more or less, there's nothing else in the chat, so I think we're more or less ready to wrap up, Lou.
Brilliant. Well, once again, folks, thanks for bearing with me with the trauma that was this morning. Really appreciate your time and sticking with us. Hopefully you can get involved in the other stuff that's going on for National Scrutiny Week. But me personally, I just want to say a big thanks to all of you for joining us today, whether you're a scrutineer, whether you're a member of staff, or whatever your role is. Fantastic to have you on board today. This recording will be going onto the YouTube channel at some point, so do look out for that. And also we've got loads of other stuff as well going off the Scrutiny Week. So it's been brilliant to meet you all. Thank you so much for your time, and look forward to hopefully hearing about your scrutiny journeys and the stuff that you've been up to through TPAS in some way, shape or form. So lovely to meet you all. Thanks everybody. Take care.
Thanks, Louise, and yeah, thanks again everybody for your patience. It was huge stress for Louise and I this morning, but we got there in the end, and I think you'll all agree that it's been a great webinar. So yeah, stay safe, stay well, and hopefully we'll see you again. As Louise said, there's lots going on this week, so have a look at what there is going on. You can still book on to today's webinar and anything else for later on in the week. So have a look. Thanks for joining us. It's lovely to see so many people involved, and we hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye everybody.
Bye everyone. Bye.